Sarah, I need you to take a look at something special. Derek Morrison's voice made my skin crawl as he called me into his corner office. I'd been Morrison & Associates' top financial analyst for 3 years, and his tone told me this wasn't about quarterly reports. The blinds were drawn tight, casting shadows across his mahogany desk where manila folders sat in perfect stacks. "Close the door," he said, not looking up from his computer screen. My heart started racing. Derek never asked for closed-door meetings unless someone was getting fired or promoted. Given his cold stare, I doubted this was about a raise. He slid 3 thick folders across the desk. "I'm putting together a special project team. You've always been my most trusted analyst." The way he said trusted made my stomach flip. I opened the first folder and immediately wished I hadn't. Invoices for services never rendered. Client signatures that looked suspiciously similar. Payment schedules for companies I'd never heard of. And every single fraudulent document was stamped with Hartwell Industries logo. "Derek, what is this?" I whispered, my hands shaking as I flipped through page after page of fabricated evidence. "This," he smiled coldly, "is your future. You're either on the team or off it, Sarah." Derek leaned back in his leather chair, fingers steepled like he was discussing the weather instead of millions in fraud. The folders lay open between us, evidence of a scheme so sophisticated it must have taken months to plan. "I've been studying you for a while," he continued, his voice disturbingly calm. "Your work patterns, your psychological profile, how you handle pressure. I knew exactly how you'd react when I showed you this." My blood ran cold. He'd been planning this moment, watching me, preparing for my response. "I won't be part of this," I said, standing up so fast my chair rolled backward. "I'm reporting this to the authorities." Derek's laugh was sharp and cruel. "Are you sure about that?" He pressed a button on his desk. A small red light blinked off on a device I hadn't noticed before. "I've been recording our entire conversation, Sarah. Every word." His fingers danced over his keyboard. "And editing audio these days? Child's play. I can make it sound like this whole scheme was your idea." My mouth went dry as I realized the trap he'd set. Not just for Hartwell Industries, but for me too. 3 days of sleepless nights later, Derek called me into the conference room. The entire office staff was already seated around the long glass table, their faces curious and concerned. My heart hammered against my ribs as I took the only empty chair, directly across from Derek. "As you all know," Derek began, his voice carrying the authority of someone who'd never been questioned, "performance standards at Morrison & Associates are extremely high." His eyes locked on mine. "Unfortunately, some team members haven't met these standards." The room fell silent. 20 pairs of eyes turned toward me. Janet from accounting looked shocked. Mike from IT stared at his hands. I wanted to scream that this was all a lie, but Derek's threat about the recording echoed in my mind. Sarah Chen is being terminated for performance issues and insubordination. The words hit like physical blows. Effective immediately. As security escorted me to my desk to pack my things, I noticed Derek's satisfied smirk. But what I didn't know was that while I'd been packing, Derek had been busy planting something else in my computer. Fabricated evidence of my own embezzlement scheme that would make any future fraud accusations from me look like desperate projection. The trap was even deeper than I'd imagined. "Thank you for your interest, but we've decided to go with another candidate." It was the same response from every major firm in the city. 15 interviews in 6 weeks and 15 rejections. At first, I thought it was bad luck. Then I started noticing the pattern. The interviews would start normally. Hiring managers seemed impressed with my resume, my experience, my knowledge of financial analysis. But then came the phone calls. Always the same result, a polite decline within 24 hours. During coffee with my former colleague Janet, I finally learned the truth. "Sarah, I probably shouldn't tell you this," she whispered, glancing around the cafe nervously. "But Derek's been calling around about you. He's telling people you're a disgruntled employee with credibility issues." My coffee cup trembled in my hands. "What kind of credibility issues?" Janet's face went pale. "He's saying you stole from previous employers, that you're vindictive and untrustworthy." She leaned closer. "Sarah, he's got receipts, documents, witness statements, the whole package. It looks real." I sat there in stunned silence as the full scope of Derek's plan became clear. He hadn't just fired me, he'd systematically destroyed my entire career. Every door in the financial industry was now closed to me, sealed shut by lies wrapped in convincing evidence. 8 months of freelance bookkeeping for small businesses barely covered rent on my tiny studio apartment. I'd gone from analyzing million-dollar portfolios to balancing checkbooks for corner shops. But struggling financially had one unexpected advantage. It forced me to use skills Derek didn't know I possessed. My photographic memory had always been my secret weapon. In college, professors thought I cheated because I could recall entire textbook pages word for word. At Morrison & Associates, I'd memorized client accounts, transaction patterns, even Derek's email passwords when I glimpsed him typing them. But more importantly, I had a habit that had saved my career before, backing up everything to my personal cloud storage. Every document, every email, every suspicious transaction I'd ever encountered. It was like having a complete archive of Morrison & Associates' dirty secrets. Late one night, digging through my backed-up files, I discovered something Derek thought he'd deleted months ago. Email chains discussing the Hartwell fraud, planning documents with timestamps from before my hiring, and most damning of all, recordings of Derek coaching other employees on how to create convincing fake invoices. Derek had made one crucial mistake. He assumed I was just another analyst. He never realized I was a walking, talking surveillance system who never forgot anything and always kept copies. The job posting was simple. Night cleaning crew, Morrison & Associates building, $15 per hour. I applied using my middle name and my mother's maiden name. Sarah Michelle Tan needed work, and Derek Morrison would never look twice at cleaning staff. The irony was perfect. Derek's ego was so massive he'd never consider that the woman he'd destroyed might be emptying his trash cans. To him, janitors were invisible beneath his notice. It was the perfect cover for what I had in mind. My supervisor, Maria, handed me a key card and a cart loaded with supplies. "You'll handle floors 15 through 20, she said, pointing to a building map. "Mr. Morrison's office is on 18. He works late most nights, so just clean around him if he's there." What Maria didn't mention, and what I discovered on my first night, was that the cleaning company, Pristine Professional Services, was owned by a shell corporation. As I dug deeper into the business registration documents, I realized the horrifying truth. Derek owned the cleaning company through a network of fake businesses. I was literally being paid with stolen money to spy on the man who'd ruined my life. The universe had a twisted sense of humor. But I wasn't complaining. Derek's arrogance would be his downfall. For 6 months, I became Derek's shadow. Every Tuesday night, like clockwork, he'd stay late. Always the same routine. Normal cleaning crews dismissed early, elevators locked except for executive access, and a mysterious meeting that lasted exactly 47 minutes. I mapped his patterns like a detective. Derek arrived at work every morning at 7:30 a.m. sharp. He ordered the same lunch from the same deli. He made personal calls only from his private bathroom. And every Tuesday at 9:15 p.m., he'd walk to the parking garage's lower level to meet someone who never used the main entrance. The meeting location was always the same, behind the dumpsters where security cameras had blind spots. The person was always the same too, a tall man in an expensive suit who drove a black Mercedes with tinted windows. They'd talk quietly, exchange briefcases, and part ways without shaking hands. I started bringing a small camera hidden in my cleaning supplies. Week after week, I photographed the mysterious visitor. The license plate was always covered, but one night I got lucky. A strong wind blew his coat open, revealing a name tag, Private Investigator, Marcus Security Solutions. Derek was meeting with a private investigator every Tuesday night. But investigating what? Or more importantly, investigating whom? Derek's office was a shrine to his own paranoia. While most executives had gone digital, Derek kept physical files locked in an old-fashioned filing cabinet with a glass front. He trusted paper more than computers, convinced that digital files could be traced back to him. Through the glass, I could see manila folders arranged with military precision. Each folder was labeled with employee names, client accounts, or project codes. But one section caught my attention. Psychological profiles. Derek had been studying his employees like lab rats. Using a macro lens attachment on my phone, I photographed documents through the glass. The psychological profiles were disturbing. Derek had analyzed every employee's personality, family situation, financial pressures, and moral flexibility. He'd even noted who would likely comply with illegal activities and who would resist. My own profile was thick with notes: high moral standards, obstacle to plan, strong analytical skills, dangerous if suspicious, financial pressure, potential leverage point. He'd been planning to use my financial struggles to force my compliance. But the most chilling discovery was a separate folder labeled Exit Strategy. Inside were documents I couldn't quite make out, but I could see airline tickets, bank account numbers, and what looked like a new passport. Derek wasn't just planning fraud, he was planning to disappear. The filing cabinet's contents revealed the true scope of Derek's operation. Every night, I photographed more documents, building a complete picture of his criminal enterprise. The psychological profiles were just the beginning. Derek had been categorizing employees into 3 groups: compliant, convertible, and obstacles. The compliant group included people with gambling debts, family medical bills, or other financial pressures. The convertible group was employees who might be swayed with the right incentives. The obstacles, including me, were marked for removal. But the most disturbing file was labeled Uncle James, Posthumous Blame Strategy. James Morrison, Derek's business partner and uncle, had died 8 months ago from a heart attack. According to these documents, Derek was planning to pin the entire fraud scheme on his deceased uncle. The plan was brilliant in its cruelty. Derek would discover the fraud himself, play the shocked and betrayed nephew, and emerge as a hero who cleaned up his uncle's mess. The press would eat it up. Grieving nephew finds dead uncle's criminal conspiracy and bravely exposes it to protect the victims. James Morrison's reputation would be destroyed posthumously. Derek would walk away clean, possibly even admired for his courage in exposing family corruption. And I would be implicated as James's co-conspirator, with forged evidence placing me at meetings that happened before I was even hired. Something nagged at me about Uncle James's death. The dates in Derek's files didn't add up. I found hospital records, death certificates, and legal documents, but the timelines were inconsistent. James Morrison's death certificate was dated March 15th. But I found emails in Derek's files signed by James and dated March 23rd, 8 days after his supposed death. Either James Morrison was signing emails from beyond the grave, or something was very wrong with the official story. The attending physician listed on the death certificate was Dr. Robert Chen. No relation to me, despite the shared surname. But when I looked up Dr. Chen's medical license, I discovered he'd lost it in February for falsifying medical records. A doctor who'd lost his license the month before, supposedly signing a death certificate. The more I dug, the more holes I found. The funeral home that handled James's cremation had been closed for renovation during the week of his supposed death. The lawyer who filed his will hadn't been practicing law since January due to a suspension. Every official document related to James Morrison's death was signed by people who either didn't exist, had lost their licenses, or were unavailable during the relevant dates. It was like a house of cards built on fake credentials and fabricated paperwork. If James Morrison wasn't really dead, where was he? And why was Derek so desperate to make everyone believe his uncle was gone? The homeless man appeared outside the Morrison & Associates building about 3 months into my cleaning job. Most people walked past him without a second glance. Just another invisible person in the city's landscape. But something about him caught my attention. He mumbled constantly under his breath, words that most people dismissed as random rambling. But I started listening. Really listening. And what I heard made my blood run cold. The old man who didn't really die. He'd whisper as business people hurried past. They think he's gone, but he's right here watching everything. Other fragments caught my attention. Nephew's going to pay, and should have stayed dead. And most chillingly, he killed the real one. The homeless man's appearance was deliberately disheveled. Torn clothes, unkempt beard, dirt-stained hands. But his teeth were too good for someone living on the streets. His posture, when he thought no one was looking, was too straight, and his eyes were too intelligent, too aware. One night as I left work at 3 a.m., I saw him sorting through discarded newspapers with surgical precision. He wasn't looking for food or cans. He was reading the business section, making notes in margins with a pen that cost more than most homeless people earned in a week. This wasn't a random homeless person. This was someone with resources, someone with education, someone deliberately hiding in plain sight. The question was, who was he really? I decided to take a risk. Instead of walking past the homeless man like everyone else, I stopped and offered him coffee from the 24-hour diner across the street. His eyes, bright blue and sharp with intelligence, told me everything I needed to know. "You're not homeless," I said quietly, sitting on the bench beside him. He was silent for a long moment. Then, in a voice that was educated and cultured despite months of pretending otherwise, he said, "And you're not just a cleaning lady." We stared at each other in the dim streetlight, two people hiding in plain sight, both watching the same building, both afraid of the same man. "James Morrison," I whispered. He closed his eyes and nodded. I wondered how long it would take someone to figure it out. His hands were shaking, not from cold, but from months of fear. "Derek said he'd kill me if I ever surfaced. Said he'd already killed once to keep this secret." My heart stopped. "Killed once?" James's voice was barely audible. The real private investigator Derek was supposed to meet with, Marcus Rodriguez from Hartwell Industries. Derek murdered him 3 months ago and replaced him with a money launderer. They meet every Tuesday night to move stolen funds offshore. The Tuesday night meetings suddenly made horrible sense. Derek wasn't meeting with a legitimate investigator. He was meeting with a criminal who was helping him hide millions in stolen money, and he'd killed to protect that secret. James Morrison's story unfolded like a nightmare. 3 months before his supposed death, he'd discovered Derek's fraud scheme. Not just the Hartwell conspiracy, but a network of fake companies, shell corporations, and money laundering operations that spanned years. "I confronted him," James said, his voice hollow with exhaustion. "Told him I was going to the authorities." That's when Derek showed me what he was really capable of. Derek had calmly explained that James had 2 choices: fake his death and disappear forever, or experience a very real death that would look like an accident. To prove he wasn't bluffing, Derek had arranged for Marcus Rodriguez, the real Hartwell Industries security chief, to accidentally fall down an elevator shaft. Marcus was getting too close to the truth, James explained. He'd started asking questions about our invoicing. Derek couldn't risk exposure, so he eliminated the threat and replaced Marcus with a money launderer who looks just like him. No one at Hartwell knows their head of security is actually a criminal. The elaborate fake death had been Derek's insurance policy. With James officially dead, Derek gained complete control of the company and could blame any discovered fraud on his deceased uncle. James would be safely out of the way, too terrified to ever surface and contradict the story. But James had been recording everything from his homeless vantage point, gathering evidence of Derek's crimes while staying invisible to the man who'd threatened to kill him. "I have everything," James whispered, pulling a small recording device from his torn jacket. Months of audio evidence. Derek confessing to murder, planning more killings, discussing the money laundering operation. He pressed play, and Derek's voice filled the air. "If that FBI agent gets too close, we'll handle him the same way we handled Rodriguez. Make it look like an accident, clean up the scene, replace him with our guy." "FBI agent?" My heart raced as James fast-forwarded through hours of recordings. "The fake Marcus isn't just helping Derek move money," James explained. "He's been feeding information back to Derek about ongoing investigations. Derek thinks he's staying ahead of federal attention, but he doesn't know the FBI is already onto him." Another recording played, Derek's voice discussing plans to frame me for James's murder. The fabricated evidence, the forged documents placing me at the scene of James's fake death, even planted witnesses who would testify to seeing me with James on the day he supposedly died. "He's been planning this for over a year," James said. "You were never meant to be part of the fraud scheme. You were meant to be the fall guy for everything, the theft, my murder, even Marcus Rodriguez's death. Derek needed someone with financial expertise to take the blame, someone whose reputation he could destroy beforehand, so no one would believe their protestations of innocence. I was never a potential recruit. I was always the designated victim. The next recording James played made my blood turn to ice. Derek's voice, calm and calculating. Sarah Chen will be perfect. Her psychological profile shows high moral standards, which means she'll refuse to participate when confronted. That refusal will justify terminating her and destroying her credibility. But then another voice joined the conversation. One I didn't recognize. The FBI is getting suspicious about Rodriguez's death, the unknown voice said. Agent Williams has been asking questions. Then we deal with Agent Williams the same way we dealt with Rodriguez, Derek replied coldly. James paused the recording. The fake Marcus has been feeding Derek information about the FBI investigation this whole time. Derek thinks he's protected, but he doesn't realize the truth. He looked at me with desperate hope. Sarah, Agent Williams isn't his real name. His real name is Marcus Rodriguez. The same Marcus Rodriguez that Derek thinks he killed. The FBI faked his death to protect him. The real Marcus Rodriguez was alive, working undercover for the FBI, and Derek had no idea that his money launderer was actually feeding information back to federal agents. Marcus has been waiting for inside evidence, James explained. The FBI knows Derek is guilty, but they need documentation from inside the company to make charges stick. Your nightly photography sessions have given them exactly what they need. I stared at him in shock. You've been watching me this whole time? James nodded. Marcus has been watching you too. The FBI has been hoping Derek would target someone like you, someone with strong moral character who might become a whistleblower. The timing of my firing suddenly made perfect sense. When Derek fired me and I disappeared from their radar, they'd lost their best potential source. But my decision to become a janitor had inadvertently put me back in position to gather the evidence they desperately needed. Marcus wants to meet with you, James said, glancing around nervously, but it has to be secret. Derek's planning something big. He handed me a burner phone. Tonight, midnight, the parking garage across the street. The FBI needed my help to stop a man who'd killed once and was planning to kill again. The parking garage was eerily quiet at midnight. A black sedan with tinted windows sat in the corner, engine running. The driver's window rolled down, revealing a man who looked exactly like the fake Marcus I'd been photographing for months. But his eyes were different. Sharper, more focused. Sarah Chen, he said, stepping out of the car. I'm Marcus Rodriguez, FBI. When he showed me his badge, I noticed his hands were scarred, evidence of whatever Derek had done to fake his death. We've been building a case against Derek Morrison for 14 months, Marcus explained. We know about the fraud, the money laundering, the shell companies, but we need inside documentation to prove it in court. He pulled out a tablet showing photographs I'd taken. Your evidence is exactly what we need. But Derek's accelerating his timeline. He's planning to disappear in 30 days. My heart sank. A month wasn't enough time. That's why we need to act fast, Marcus continued. Derek's planning a press conference where he'll blame everything on his uncle and frame you for murder. We're going to let him. You want Derek to publicly accuse me of murder? I couldn't hide the panic in my voice. Marcus nodded grimly. It's the only way to catch him in lies he can't escape. Derek's ego is his weakness. He can't resist a grand gesture. When he accuses you of killing James Morrison in front of cameras, we'll have him on record making false statements. The plan was terrifying in its simplicity. Derek would hold his press conference, reveal his uncle's supposed fraud, and dramatically announce that I was James's co-conspirator and murderer. At that moment, FBI agents would enter with James Morrison, very much alive. Derek will be caught lying about a murder that never happened, framing a person who was never involved, and covering up crimes he actually committed, Marcus explained. But there was one problem. Derek had installed new security cameras in his office. My evidence-gathering missions were becoming increasingly dangerous. He knows someone's been accessing his office, Marcus warned. We need one final piece of evidence, Derek's exit strategy documents, and then you need to stop. I had one last mission, photograph Derek's escape plan before he could execute it. The new security cameras made every movement feel like a death sentence. Motion sensors tracked my cleaning cart's path through the office. Hidden cameras recorded every corner, every shadow. But Derek's paranoia worked in my favor. He'd been so focused on catching his mysterious infiltrator that he'd made a crucial mistake. He'd changed his routine. Instead of keeping sensitive documents locked away, he'd spread them across his desk where he could watch them constantly. His escape plan was laid out like a roadmap to freedom. Airline tickets to Grand Cayman under the name David Martinez. Bank account numbers for offshore accounts containing $47 million. A new passport with Derek's photo but a completely different identity. Most damning of all, a detailed schedule for his final week. Monday, transfer remaining funds offshore. Tuesday, final meeting with money launderer. Wednesday, destroy physical evidence. Thursday, eliminate remaining witnesses. Friday, press conference and immediate departure. Eliminate remaining witnesses was circled in red ink. 3 names were listed: Sarah Chen, Marcus Rodriguez, the fake one, and Agent Williams. Derek was planning to kill 3 people in the next 6 days. I photographed everything with shaking hands, then heard the elevator ding. Derek's footsteps echoed down the hallway as I frantically tried to appear busy mopping the floor. My heart hammered so loudly, I was sure he could hear it. The camera hidden in my supplies felt like it was burning through my cleaning cart. Working late tonight? Derek's voice made me jump. I looked up, trying to keep my expression neutral. Yes, sir. Just finishing up the executive floor. Derek's eyes scanned the office, taking in every detail. He walked to his desk, checking that his papers were exactly where he'd left them. Then he examined the filing cabinet, running his fingers along the glass front. Have you noticed anyone else on this floor during your shifts? He asked casually. No, sir. Just you when you work late. He studied my face for what felt like hours. You look familiar. Have we met before? My blood turned to ice. I don't think so, sir. I just started this job a few months ago. Derek nodded slowly, but his eyes never left my face. Be careful working alone at night. There have been reports of unauthorized people in the building. As he walked away, I realized Derek suspected something but couldn't prove it yet. The next morning, I called in sick to the cleaning company and met Marcus at a coffee shop across town. His face was grim as I handed him the photos of Derek's elimination schedule. He's planning to kill you tomorrow night, Marcus said, studying the images. That gives us less than 24 hours to set our trap. Derek's press conference was scheduled for Friday morning, exactly 1 year and 2 weeks after he'd fired me. The timing wasn't coincidental. Derek loved symbolic gestures. We're moving the timeline up, Marcus decided. Derek won't expect us to act before his press conference. We'll arrest him Thursday night, right after his final meeting with the money launderer. But there was one complication. Derek had a dead man's switch. If he was arrested or killed, a digital system would automatically release damaging information about city officials he'd been bribing. Let him activate it, Marcus said with a cold smile. Derek thinks his corruption evidence is leverage, but it's actually more proof of his crimes. When he tries to bring down city officials to save himself, he'll only succeed in proving his criminal network is bigger than we thought. Derek's ego would be his ultimate downfall. 1 year and 2 weeks after Derek Morrison fired me for refusing to participate in his fraud scheme, my phone rang at exactly 3:17 p.m. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize, but the voice was one I'd been waiting to hear. Sarah Chen? This is Agent Marcus Rodriguez, FBI. Even though I'd been expecting this call, hearing Marcus identify himself as FBI instead of Hartwell Industries Security sent chills down my spine. Everything James had told me was true. We're ready to move, Marcus said. Derek's holding his press conference tomorrow morning. Are you prepared for what's going to happen? I took a deep breath, thinking about the year of struggle, the destroyed reputation, the night spent cleaning offices while planning revenge. I've been ready for this moment since the day he fired me. Good, because Derek's about to discover that destroying your life was the biggest mistake he ever made. Marcus explained the final details. Derek would reveal his uncle's supposed fraud, then dramatically announce that I was James's murderer. At that exact moment, FBI agents would enter the room. Your dismissal was actually the trigger that started our investigation, Marcus said. It fit the profile of witness intimidation perfectly. The press conference was held in Morrison & Associates' main conference room, the same room where Derek had publicly humiliated me exactly 1 year and 2 weeks earlier. Local reporters, financial journalists, and several law enforcement officials filled every seat. Derek stood at the podium, looking confident and composed, every inch the successful businessman, bravely exposing corruption. He had no idea that half the people in the room were FBI agents wearing press credentials. "Ladies and gentlemen," Derek began, "I'm here today to reveal a terrible truth about my own family." He launched into his prepared story. His beloved Uncle James had been running a massive fraud scheme, stealing millions from clients. Derek painted himself as the grieving nephew who'd discovered his uncle's crimes after James's tragic death. But James Morrison didn't work alone. Derek continued. He had a co-conspirator, someone who helped him plan and execute this scheme, someone who ultimately murdered him when he threatened to confess. The room was silent, hanging on every word. "That person is Sarah Chen, my former employee, and I have evidence that proves her guilt beyond any reasonable doubt." Derek began displaying fabricated documents, forged emails, fake witness statements, all designed to frame me for crimes I'd never committed. Derek was in full performance mode, dramatically revealing each piece of fabricated evidence against me. Bank records showing payments I'd never received, hotel receipts placing me at meetings that never happened. Even a witness who claimed to have seen me arguing with James Morrison on the day of his supposed death. Sarah Chen murdered James Morrison to keep him from exposing their fraud scheme, Derek declared, his voice rising with theatrical passion. "She's been hiding in plain sight for over a year, but justice will finally be served." The reporters were frantically taking notes, cameras flashing as Derek painted me as a cold-blooded killer. I sat in the back of the room, my hands clenched in my lap, watching the man who destroyed my life try to destroy it again. But Derek made one final, fatal mistake. In his arrogance, he activated his dead man's switch right there during the press conference, releasing his corruption evidence to demonstrate the kind of power he wielded. "If anyone tries to silence me," he announced grandly, "the truth about this city's corrupt officials will be exposed. I have evidence of bribes, kickbacks, and illegal deals involving." That's when the FBI agents revealed themselves. "Derek Morrison, you're under arrest." The room erupted in chaos as agents moved in from every direction. Derek's face went from confident to confused to terrified in the span of seconds. But the real shock came when James Morrison walked through the conference room doors, very much alive. "Hello, nephew?" James Morrison's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. The room fell silent as reporters realized they were witnessing something far bigger than a simple fraud case. Derek's face turned white as he stared at the uncle he thought he'd successfully eliminated. "Impossible," Derek whispered. "You're dead. I have the death certificate, the funeral records, everything." "You have forged documents," FBI agent Marcus Rodriguez said, stepping forward to reveal his true identity. "Just like everything else in your life, Derek. Built on lies and held together by violence." Derek's legs gave out and he collapsed into a chair as the full scope of his failure became clear. His dead man's switch hadn't given him leverage. It had provided the FBI with even more evidence of his criminal network. City officials he'd been bribing were already being arrested across town. 40 years in federal prison, the judge would later declare, rejecting Derek's attempts to negotiate a plea deal. His ego prevented him from accepting any agreement that required admitting guilt. As Derek was led away in handcuffs, he turned to snarl at me one final time. "You destroyed my life." I looked into the eyes of the man who'd fired me, blacklisted me, and tried to frame me for murder. "No, Derek, you destroyed your own life. I just made sure everyone else knew about it." The judge's final revelation was the sweetest justice of all. Derek's corruption evidence had triggered the largest municipal cleanup in the city's history. As a result, I received a $2.3 million whistleblower reward and was offered the position of Director of Financial Compliance at Hartwell Industries. Derek Morrison had tried to destroy me for refusing to be part of